I never waited for anyone who was late more than 10 minutes in my life.
I'd say 15. 15's right.
No, 10.
I don't think so. 10's not enough. You have to take traffic into account.
That's what I'm doing. I'm taking traffic into account.
Martin Scorsese's career, despite what some may say, is incredibly varied. He's done almost every genre that you could think of. He's made comedies, religious epics, romances, character studies, historical epics, thrillers, dramas, biopics, documentaries, and of course crime movies. People tend to think of him as a director who stuck to the crime genre. Maybe those are the only films of the over 24 that he's made that they've watched. I think it's even more apparent now, especially with the release of The Irishman, that Martin Scorsese is in a different weight class than the vast majority of filmmakers. While all the crime movies from this director are somewhat similar, they still have things that make them stand out from each other, whether it's themes, pacing, or plot structure. They're all different in some way. The Irishman is insanely different from his other forays into the genre. It's a reflection on the genre that he's made insanely popular. In this movie, he addresses a lot of the criticisms that are typically levied at him, one of which is that he glorifies the lives of the criminals he depicts, which is just false, as he only shows his subjects' views on their crimes. Henry Hill loved being a gangster, and Jordan Belfort loved his life. As such, their narration always sounded like they were reliving the glory days. In The Irishman, Frank Sheeran speaks with a hint of regret and sadness, when recalling his criminal exploits and his life. Those weren't glory days for him. Martin Scorsese goes an extra step to show that almost every gangster he shows had a grim fate. Every time one pops up, so does a caption stating how they were killed, which is quite funny. Despite The Irishman being one of his most grimmest features, The Irishman is also one of his funniest. I'm glad he cast Ray Romano in another one of his projects, as he is one of the best things about this movie. Along with Stephen Graham, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro give their best performance in over 20 years. The scene they share in the end, where Sheeran is trying to convince Jimmy Hoffa to quit his stubborn ways, is devastating. The same can be said about the majority of De Niro's work here. He's quiet and stoic yet full of reflection. While Pacino and De Niro are phenomenal, the best acting in the whole movie comes from Joe Pesci. The stuff he turns in here is nothing short of outstanding, a far cry from the hothead that he's typically typecasted as, which incidentally made him quit acting in the first place. He says so much with so few expressions. He never overacts for a second. A perfectly calculated performance that portrays a perfectly calculated man. The de-aging tech in The Irishman is a little distracting in the first couple scenes, but is never too distracting, as Scorsese cuts back and forth between different eras, so we're never too focused on the young Robert De Niro. While I understand why he cast De Niro, I can't help but feel like some scenes would have benefited from a younger actor. For example, there's a scene where he beats up a man who put hands on his daughter, and you could just tell that the actor is over 70 years old, as there's no man that's younger than 50 who moves or fights like that. This doesn't need to be said, as this is the case for the vast majority of Martin Scorsese movies, but The Irishman is impeccably crafted. Every shot contains the perfect amount of cinematic energy and information that the story needs. The music is well used, and of course the track list contains a bunch of classic songs. It's tightly edited. Despite what that runtime might tell you, it never truly fails. 3 hours and 30 minutes long, the ending hour is where the film reaches heights that most directors can only dream of reaching. It reminds me of the ending section of Once Upon a Time in America. You know, the cold honest reflection of one's life, decisions and faults. That's something that few filmmakers can pull off, and Scorsese is one of them. The Irishman is so vast yet so intimate. I loved it and can't wait to watch it again. I would recommend seeing this in a movie theater if you can. If you can't, then check it out on Netflix.